All right, guys, class is in session. Take your seats for part 2 on Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, wow!
Dr. Strangelove, Kubrick became interested in the idea of extraterrestrials and decided to make a science fiction movie for his next film. He admired Arthur C. Clarke's book Childhood's End, but much to his chagrin, the rights were already taken. So Kubrick then reached out to Clarke in a letter and proposed that they collaborate on a really good science fiction movie together. According to Clarke, Kubrick was determined to create a work of art that would arouse the emotions of wonder, awe, and even terror. The two developed both the book and the screenplay for 2001 in tandem, working in parallel off each other's ideas. This film changed the face of science fiction filmmaking forever, making a quantum leap in visual effects. It gave movie audiences the first realistic depiction of space. Just to put it in perspective, the first color photograph of the entire Earth from space, called the Blue Marble, wasn't released until 1972, 4 years after 2001.
Oh, wow.
That's right. And in fact, man hadn't even stepped foot on the moon at that point. 2001 was filled with things that people had never seen before. And Steven Spielberg has called 2001 the Big Bang of his filmmaking generation. Kubrick intended 2001 to be a non-verbal visual experience in order to bypass the audience's logical, conscious mind and to stir a reaction within the viewer's subconscious. Kubrick himself said in a rare interview in Playboy magazine, "You're free to speculate as you wish about the philosophical and allegorical meaning of the film, and such speculation is one indication that it has succeeded in gripping the audience at a deep level. But I don't want to spell out a verbal roadmap for 2001 that every viewer will feel obligated to pursue or else fear he's missed the point."
What?
So like, he doesn't want to tell the viewer what to think, but instead for them to form their own opinions from the feelings that arise from the viewing. 2001 was open to interpretation in audiences around the world. Hailed today as one of the greatest movies ever made, at the time, 2001 was met with mixed reviews, and 241 people even walked out of its opening screening. Stanley Kubrick was counting, too. That's his estimate of how many people walked out.
They walked out.
It was old dudes, old executive dudes. They didn't get it, but, you know, they're old, whatever. Now, if you're someone who's never seen the movie 2001, I encourage you, I implore you to sit down and watch this movie. And when you go into it, you have to be like open to this experience. Like, you just have to let 2001 happen to you. Because at first, you might be a little confused because there's such little dialogue, and you're required to be with your own thoughts for much of the runtime. But after it's over, the movie just doesn't leave your mind. You know, you just keep thinking about it. It calls to you to like watch it again. And then the next time you watch it, you're gonna find it growing on you, and you're gonna find like new facets every time you watch it. In fact, I've seen it like a ton, and like every time I watch it, I find new things every time.
What's the deal with that block thing?
In essence, the monolith appears at pivotal times in man's development, setting off evolutionary leaps in our consciousness. It first appears during the time of primitive apes, expanding their awareness, causing them to begin to use tools. Now, 2001 originally had a lot of scenes that had more explanation, but up to 20 minutes, along with much of the dialogue, was eventually cut by Kubrick.
Ooh, what kind of stuff was cut?
Well, Space Brain, originally there was an opening 10-minute prologue of interviews with actual scientists before the film. There was also a scene with the astronauts Bowman and Poole living on Earth that mirrored the events of the apes' lives. And at the end of the movie, there was a scene where the Star Child returns to Earth and then destroys all of the world's nuclear bombs. Fun fact, 2001 was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director but lost in both categories to Oliver, a Carol Reed musical based on the Charles Dickens Oliver Twist novel.
Oliver?
I know.
That sounds boring.
Like, who's talking about Oliver today? Nobody. Who's talking about 2001? Me.
Greater Creators Oliver.
No, nah, bro. However, 2001 did earn Kubrick the one and only Oscar that he received in his entire career for visual effects, which technically should have gone to special effects supervisor Douglas Trumbull. It's crazy to me that Stanley Kubrick never won an Oscar for Best Director, even though everyone in the world knows he's the best director of like all time.
Why do you think that is?
Well, Space Brain, I think part of it is because he didn't play by Hollywood's rules, and he left there, and he didn't care about press, and he didn't want to be a part of the studio system, and he wanted to work outside the system, and so I feel like he was unfairly punished.
So they want you to be a part of their club.
Yes. Stanley Kubrick didn't want to be in their Hollywood club because, to be honest, he thought that he was better than them, because he was better than them, and they knew that he was better than them, so they both shunned each other. If 2001 is a movie exploring not science fiction as much as science eventuality, showcasing the evolution of humanity from ape to man to star child, his next film remained grounded on Earth, exploring the problems of senseless evil and violence in our world. It was 1971's A Clockwork Orange, which was released with an X rating.
What's A Clockwork Orange about?
Well, Robot, A Clockwork Orange is an exploration of violence, juvenile delinquency, and free will set in a dystopian future following the misadventures of a charismatic gang leader named Alex DeLarge. In the movie, we witness him and his droogs indulge in a bit of the old ultra-violence, to Alex's eventual capture and incarceration, and finally his disastrous rehabilitation by the state through experimental aversion therapy.
He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
Kubrick himself stated the film was a social satire dealing with the question of whether behavioral psychology and psychological conditioning are dangerous new weapons for a totalitarian government to use to impose vast controls on its citizens and turn them into little more than robots.
Robots? What's wrong with that?
After its release, A Clockwork Orange was blamed for inciting all sorts of murder and mayhem in the UK, resulting in Kubrick and his family receiving death threats. Even his children had to have police escorts to school. This resulted in Kubrick personally pulling the film from being screened in the United Kingdom. An unprecedented move that showed just how much power Kubrick had over his films.
Teacher, why do you think that A Clockwork Orange was such a problem for certain people that they gave him death threats?
Here's the thing, Space Brain. Society's always looking for scapegoats for like violence and stuff that's going on, right? So unfortunately for Kubrick, this film became the scapegoat for violence in England.
Oh, just like comic books in the 1950s.
Just like comic books were scapegoated in the 1950s, just like rap music and video games were scapegoated in the 90s. I mean, it's like every decade has its new scapegoat of like what's making the children go crazy.
What's making the grown-ups go crazy?
Here's the thing about A Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick didn't give any moral judgments on like what's going on in the story, okay? It's kind of like back from a ways. People were like, oh, you're terrible. Like, why did you make this film? Like, you make people think that violence is okay. When that's not what he's trying to say at all. He's just trying not to put his own stuff in there so that the audience can come up with their own ideas and their own interpretations. However, the media didn't consider the message behind the movie and instead chose to focus on the violence portrayed in the film. In the 70s, Kubrick had spent a really long time writing and researching a huge biopic about Napoleon Bonaparte, with Jack Nicholson as his possible star.
What movie?
Napoleon Bonaparte? And when I say research, like, I mean research. Like, this guy was notorious for, like, insane amounts of research because he cared that much about his films. So to make Napoleon, Kubrick went above and beyond, as he always does, doing ridiculous amounts of research for a full 2 years.
2 years?
2 years! utilizing dozens of assistants and even a Napoleon specialist from Oxford, putting together an unheard of amount of material on the man, including a card catalog system following the day-by-day movements and actions of both Napoleon and his inner circle during their active years. Now, unfortunately for him, the failure of another Napoleon movie called Waterloo made his financiers freaked out, so they ended up dropping out of the film, and he couldn't get the funding that he needed for the massive location shoots and the military extras, so he had to abandon the film.
Oh no.
Oh no is right. In fact, Stanley Kubrick had planned to hire an entire country's military as extras for this movie. That's how committed he was.
Wow.
He wanted 10,000 people on that field, okay?
Why did Stanley Kubrick want to make a Napoleon movie? I don't even like Napoleon ice cream.
First of all, that's Neapolitan ice cream, and second of all, he was fascinated by the figure of Napoleon, okay? Because Napoleon was another person who was really smart and really talented, just like Stanley, but he ended up making these decisions that just ruined his life, and Stanley was obsessed because he didn't want to make those same mistakes that Napoleon had made. Even though his Napoleon film fell apart, Kubrick funneled his massive amount of period research into 1975's Barry Lyndon, where he went to great lengths to create an authentic 18th century experience using almost all natural lighting. That's right, Stanley stayed away from conventional electric lights and had to find a way to light entire interior scenes using only candlelight.
Wow, the whole movie with candlelight?
The whole movie with candlelight. This is crazy. In the 70s, he figured out a way to light a scene on camera with candlelight. People barely even do that today still. Stanley did this with the help of the NASA Zeiss lens that has an f-stop of 0.7.
Oh my gosh.
Now, there were only 10 of these lenses in existence at the time. Originally developed for NASA's Apollo lunar program for satellite photography of the far side of the moon, Zeiss had one of the lenses, NASA had 6, and Stanley got his hands on the other 3.
Well, why do you think he made Barry Lyndon?
Well, Space Brain, I think Kubrick made Barry Lyndon because he had just made Clockwork Orange, and A Clockwork Orange had so much violence in it, and it was really crazy, and people were really down on him about it, and they were how dare you make such a controversial film? So he's fine, you want me to make a chill-ass film? I'll make a chill film. And he made the chillest film with Barry Lyndon, which is just it's not a lot of violence, it's not really challenging, but it is gorgeous. And then people were bummed at him for not making something controversial, you know? That's how it goes with the public.
I see.
Unfortunately, at the time, Barry Lyndon was a financial and critical disappointment. And it was this air of disappointment that bummed Kubrick out and spurred him into adapting a more financially viable story, Stephen King's best-selling novel, The Shining. The Shining is a supernatural horror suspense film regarded by many as one of the greatest horror films ever made. In it, we follow the Torrance family's descent into darkness during their extreme isolation as caretakers of the haunted Overlook Hotel.
So is it scary or something?
Yes. Scary and beautiful. Kubrick's calculated gamble paid off, and The Shining was considered a success, as well as being the first film to fully utilize the potential of the brand new Steadicam technology.
Oh wow, they didn't have Steadicam before that?
No, it was brand new, okay? No one had really used this technology before. And so Stanley, being an innovator, with his last film using the Zeiss lens, he wanted to keep upping the ante. So he got this guy to come in and use the Steadicam and just really make it happen. And it just the technology blew up after this film. This film in particular is subject to numerous theories on the deeper meanings behind the movie and is widely debated by Kubrick enthusiasts all over the world.
Why is that?
Well, here's the thing. Kubrick's movies are always layered with all this meaning, and the themes in this movie aren't readily apparent because he does everything for a reason, everything. And there's all these curious things that he changed from the book to the movie that's why did he change it? For example, In the book, the haunted room is 217, but in the movie, it's 237. Why did he change it to 237? There has to be a reason. This movie is a total enigma, okay?
What do you think he was trying to say?
Well, there's a lot of theories. One theory is that the movie is really about when Woodrow Wilson took the US off the gold standard. Another idea out there is that this movie is really about the American Indian genocide. Then, there's also my personal favorite, the theory that this movie is an admonition of Stanley Kubrick that he faked the footage of the moon landing for the US government. Why is Danny wearing that Apollo 11 shirt, huh? There's the bell, but we're not done with Stanley Kubrick yet. Tune into part 3 of Stanley Kubrick, talking about the later half of this film legend's career.